Hey, I'm Andrew Connell. This video is an overview of one of the chapters in my course that's available for purchase on my site, Voitanos.io. This overview video is going to give you an idea of everything that the chapter covers. You can learn more by checking out the description in the notes below the video. If you got any questions about this chapter or about the course in general, just make sure you drop a comment below below the video, and I'll be sure to get back to you. So with that, let me get out of the way. Enjoy the overview to this chapter. Hello, and welcome back to my course on mastering the SharePoint framework. In this chapter, I'm going to cover another type of component that the SharePoint framework supports. Other component types, such as web parts, extensions, and library components, they're available everywhere and anywhere that you can use the SharePoint framework. But the component type that I'm going to cover in this chapter is primarily only used in Viva Connections and Viva Home. That's the Adaptive Card Extension component type, also referred to as an ACE. That's what this chapter is all about. Let's start by answering the question, why do we have Adaptive Card Extensions? From this point forward, I'm going to probably refer to them just by their acronym of ACEs. In many ways, Viva Connections is just a SharePoint site. And that means that all the existing ways that developers can customize SharePoint sites apply to Viva Connections, because Viva Connections is just showing you SharePoint pages. And that means that you can use things like web parts or application customizers to customize the experience. Microsoft released this new product, Viva Connections, in September of 2021. And it's a bit of a simplification, but you can think of Viva Connections as the app version of a SharePoint intranet for an organization. Now, by the way, when I say Viva Connections, I also mean the Viva Home experience. That's another app that's released by Microsoft in January of 2023. Anything you hear about me when I say ACEs, it applies to both Viva Connections and Viva Home. And in fact, I'm probably just going to say Viva to refer to both of these tools in the context of where you can use ACEs. So this is also exclusively just a SharePoint Online feature. ACEs are not for on-premises SharePoint deployments. And for the most part, everything that I mentioned is going to work the same on the web, desktop, including the Microsoft Teams Viva Connections app and the mobile experiences for Viva Connections. However, you want to make sure you check the notes for this lesson for any odd or different things, as some clients, specifically the mobile clients, they can behave a little bit differently at times. Sometimes they're buggy and sometimes it's a feature, but I'm going to just leave that in the notes. The other thing that Viva Connections has is this thing called a dashboard experience. And what developers can do is they can create these little interactive tiles that can be added to these dashboards. Those little interactive tiles, those are ACEs. Now, while I have a lot more to cover, that's about as much as I want to say right now about ACEs. This lesson is just simply an overview of this chapter. So let me explain what you're going to learn in this chapter before I get too far ahead of myself. Now, the next lesson, I'm going to explain what adaptive cards are and provide a little primer on the technology that ACEs are based on. This is something that every SharePoint developer who's building an ACE must be familiar with. Then, I'm going to start diving into the meat of the chapter. And I'm going to start with an introduction to ACEs and explain a bit more about how they work and all the different pieces that make up ACEs. And once you're armed with this knowledge, we can start building things. Throughout this chapter, we're going to build and customize an ACE project. And this lesson is going to start by exploring and customizing the cornerstone of an ACE project. The cornerstone, that's the ACE class, the thing that the SharePoint framework is going to look to find all the information about the component. We're also going to look at the familiar property pane and how it works with ACEs. And then I'm going to move on to the first of two visual elements in the ACE, the card view. We'll explore all the things that we can do with this. And after tackling the card view, I'm going to move on to explore the other visual component, the quick view class. Well, that's the second of the two UX components that make up an ACE. And finally, we'll look at the Viva-specific adaptive card actions. These actions aren't part of the core adaptive card schema, but they're important enough that you should be aware of them when building custom ACEs. Okay, that wraps up my discussion and an overview of what ACEs are. And in the next lesson, I want to start with a primer on what adaptive cards are, one of the core technologies that ACEs are founded on. You should watch this primer lesson if you've never worked with adaptive cards before. But if you're already familiar with adaptive cards, feel free to skip to the third lesson where we dive right into ACEs. So I'll see you in the next or the next lesson. That ACEs are founded on. You should watch this primer lesson if you've never worked with adaptive cards before. But if you're already familiar with adaptive cards, feel free to skip to the third lesson where we dive right into ACEs. So I'll see you in the next or the next lesson.